Hello, and welcome to the presentation for the passenger rail station location study for the city of Colorado Springs. My name is Chris Proud, and I'm going to be the one to walk you through this presentation that includes the latest information of the work that the project team has been doing to identify the right location for a new passenger rail station in Colorado Springs. This is actually the second of two major stakeholder engagement milestones, and this presentation will be available online from August the 8th through August the 19th. And we also ask that at the end of the presentation, you also click on our questionnaire link so that you can provide additional feedback to the project team. So before we dive into the details, let's provide a little bit of project background. So why are we looking for a passenger rail station location in Colorado Springs? There are actually two ongoing studies, one being the Southwest Chief Through Car extension. This is the potential to extend the existing Amtrak Southwest Chief service up from La Junta to Pueblo and ultimately to Colorado Springs. The other is a study that's happening by the newly formed Front Range Passenger Rail District, examining potential passenger rail all along the Front Range from Pueblo up to Fort Collins or even beyond. And with that said, I think it's important to point out that a new passenger rail station in Colorado Springs would likely not be developed by the city itself. It would likely be led by a combination of partners, possibly CDOT, possibly the Front Range Passenger Rail District, or again, a combination of partners to move forward for funding, design, and actually implementing and operating the station itself. As a project team, our charge is to identify a passenger rail station location, but there are a number of different considerations that go into doing that. One is we really want to make sure that we're positioning the city and the city's residents to be able to respond to future passenger rail. Should the Southwest Chief Extension come to Colorado Springs or the Front Range Passenger Rail move forward, we want to make sure that the city and residents are ready to say, this is the location where we as a community believe the station should be located. And that should consider connectivity, city and regional plans, and of course our local stakeholders. And this work really provides direction to whomever is going to take the station forward for implementation, be that CDOT or the Front Range Passenger Rail District, so that they know the city's preferred site, understanding again that the city may not be the funder or the implementer of the station itself. We began our work in the fall of 2021, and we've been following a logical step-by-step process to examine the different sites and narrow to those that we think are the most promising, including some recommendations that we have later in the presentation. We are looking at completing our work in summer of 2022. Our evaluation process had multiple steps. We initially had a range or multiple different station location sites that we were examining, and we took those through various levels of evaluation, as you can see on the slide here. There were three core steps that ultimately get us to our final options. Now, in order to go through each of those steps and be able to narrow to just the most promising potential sites, we applied a variety of different criteria, really thinking about the range of things from parcel considerations, such as, do we have impact to particular properties, to how close are we to activity centers, can people walk and access the station? What about economic development or transit or multimodal access or even environmental considerations? So there were a variety of different considerations that went into narrowing down the sites themselves. The blue dots on this graphic represent the 11 different sites that we started with so that we could apply the criteria that we spoke about and narrow these sites down to those that we thought were the most promising and ultimately our recommendations. Just to orient yourself on the map, you see the gray line, and that's the rail corridor as it comes through Colorado Springs. You can see the white line, that's actually I-25, almost parallel to the rail. And you can see in the center here, it's downtown Colorado Springs. And the green dots on the graphic now represent what we shared with you in our last engagement milestone, where we narrowed those blue dots of 11 down to 4 of the green dots that are here. And since that time, we've taken it even further, where we've examined actual layouts and how stations could potentially work on each of these green dots. And I'm going to step you through each of those going forward. So let's talk about the station locations specifically and how they might lay out and work, as well as what are some of the pros and cons of each. So we'll begin by examining our first site, which is at the Nevada Tejon area. And let me orient you a little bit on the map and talk about a few key features that'll actually apply to all of the graphics that we talk through on each site here today. So just to orient you on the graphic itself, you see Tejon Street going north-south through the corridor. You see Nevada Avenue also going north-south through the corridor. And you can see this existing rail corridor as it kind of curves at the top of the graphic. And that is where the freight rail is today, where it crosses over Nevada and over Tejon. And it does go over these. The roads go under today, so the rail is raised up. Now, there is a plan to actually relocate that rail and take that curve out. And we're actually reflecting that in our graphic. You can see the relocated rail corridor coming through at more of a straight feature. And you can see the bridges that have been designed to cross over that. Now, just a couple other features, you start to see the layout of our site. And again, you'll see this on each of the graphics. There's a parking area, there's a station building, there's bus and pickup drop-off, there are pedestrian crossings. And in this particular case, we have our platform here at the middle point of the graphic. And what I mean by platform is that's the area where people get on and off the train. And that gray feature is about 700 feet long, and that is the primary platform. And the red represents some additional expansion that could be required as passenger rail grows in the corridor. Now you can see that both of these are designed, including the platform and the rail, freight rail corridor, to have bridges over Tejon and over Nevada. A couple of questions that you might have. One is about this location of the platform. Why is it so far away from our station building and not tucked up right against it? Well, you'll see this configuration in all of the graphics that we have. And part of that has to do with how the freight rail operates in the corridor. And if we were to place that platform on the opposite side, actually closer to the station, it could create a number of conflicts there that could actually make the project more expensive. Now, once our project is complete, additional design will happen on the preferred station location, and they could look at alternative locations for that platform. But for purposes of our analysis, we've tried to place it in an area where it could have the least conflicts for the moment. But again, understanding that there's additional analysis that will need to be done as the design moves forward. The same is really true about the station layout itself. I really don't want you to get caught up on, oh, I don't like how that parking is laid out, or I don't like how the station, accesses buses, because this is not the way that it will necessarily be laid out. Our particular project is about selecting the appropriate site for a passenger rail station, not about actually designing and laying out the station itself. That's work that'll happen over time after our project is complete. And our public stakeholders will have an opportunity to provide feedback on that station design as well. So it likely won't look exactly like we have it laid out, but we've laid it out in such a way that generally works for the basic parameters of what we need for a station as we understand it today. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about the Nevada Tejon site itself. And we do have some various constraints here. I mentioned these bridges and the fact that the rail is going to continue to be elevated through this area so Tejon and Nevada can pass under it. And that actually creates additional expense for our project of building those bridges as part of the station or the development of the rail corridor. We originally wanted to site the station really more centered over Nevada Avenue because the proposed bus rapid transit in that area. The thought was that we would have really good bus integration there, but unfortunately the way the track actually curves on either end to go north and south really doesn't allow us to place our station exactly where we would like it to be. So we're really centered on Tejon. One benefit that we have here is, as I mentioned, this rail corridor relocation actually is going to be buying a number of properties in this area as part of that project, which is separate from the station. So it opens up some property that could be available for development of the station as well. So there's some positives here, but I would say probably a few more negatives related to this particular site. The next site is what we refer to as the Drake West area, and I'll just orient you on the map before we get going. You can see at the top here, this is actually a portion of the Drake Power Station in this area. So north is actually to your right. Then you see the rail corridor coming through and Cimarron Street here entering into downtown, where east would be at the bottom. And then this is the area along Sierra Madre where there's a number of different developments and redevelopments happening, including the soccer stadium at the corner of Cimarron and Sierra Madre Street. So again, just to orient you a little bit before we get moving. Now you can see that our station visualization is actually obscuring part of the Drake Power Station. And you can see our platform in this area, and then also our parking and building and other street access, etc. Now, one of the major challenges with this site is that while we understand that the Drake Power Station will ultimately be fully shut down, it is currently today operating as a gas-powered station, but there are plans ultimately to redevelop it. Unfortunately, the timeline for that is still unknown. And in order to develop a station or a passenger rail station in the location where we're showing it here, the Drake Power Station buildings would need to be removed. So unfortunately, given the timing associated with this and that it is possible that an extension of the Southwest Chief could come within the next 5 to 10 years, we don't believe that the power station complete shutdown and redevelopment would occur within that time frame. So this is one that is potentially flawed. Our next site is the Drake East area, and this is a variation on the site that we just showed you. You can see the Drake Power Station here on the west, but we've actually moved our station facilities to the east side of the rail corridor itself. Now you can see our platform for that people would use to board or alide the train is actually in the same location. However, it does obstruct a portion of Conejo Street as it moves in front of the Drake Power Station. So to relocate that street, unfortunately, we would need more space than is available in that location. And again, similar to the Drake West option, it would require that the Drake Power Station buildings be removed or at least be moving towards redevelopment. So this is another where it is a good location, but unfortunately the timing of the Drake redevelopment may preclude this from occurring. So let's talk a little bit about what we refer to as the America the Beautiful Park area station. And I'll orient you here. You can see Cimarron Street going east-west. You can see Sierra Madre at the bottom of your graphic going north-south, basically parallel to the existing rail corridor as it goes through downtown. The Olympic Museum and Paralympic Museum, as well as the Park Union pedestrian bridge that connects over to America the Beautiful Park. And then you see a small piece of the Drake Power Station kind of peeking out in this area as well. Again, just to orient yourself. Now, our station is proposed to be tucked in between the new Olympic Museum, as well as integrated with some future planned development in this area. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we show a typical layout with surface parking, a small building, actually our pedestrian, in this case it's a tunnel or an overpass that goes over to our platform where people would pick up the train or be dropped off. Now, it's likely that this station layout would not necessarily look like this, but again, this is a typical just so that we can understand what generally works on the site. There are some definite benefits of having a station in this location. We've played with a variety of different platform locations, and we were able to place it in this spot to avoid a variety of different impacts to buildings to the north and other properties. One thing that we will have to deal with is a potential relocation of Conejo Street that would slightly have to shift as it passes in front of the Drake Power Station. We see that as a temporary street. Once the Drake Power Station were to redevelop, then that can be decided as to how the street grid and street network or Conejos may actually pass through the new development. But again, that is fairly far into the future, so we would temporarily relocate it. And we believe that we can avoid impacts to significant buildings that are on the existing Drake power station. And we're actually working with Colorado Springs utilities to be able to understand how that design might work and making sure that it meets all of their requirements from a safety perspective and others. In addition to that, the station is located quite well given the level of investment that's been made in this area. You have the soccer stadium, you have significant investment in improvements to Sierra Madre, to Vermejo, to the overall multimodal network in this area, including the new ZEB shuttle that follows along in this area as well. This area also includes what's referred to as a business improvement district for the Park Union area. And what a business improvement district does is based on the property owners, it actually takes care of a significant amount of infrastructure within the area. The proximity to downtown and being able to walk and bike or take transit is critical in this area as well. And finally, you have good access to I-25 for people that might be coming from other parts of Colorado Springs or even further beyond. So with that, we do believe that this is generally a positive site. The next site is referred to as the Depot Square East area. And just to orient you a little bit here, you can see this is Colorado Avenue going east-west over the rail corridor. You can see Monument Creek here and also I-25 peeking in on the west side. This is the rail corridor in the center, and right here is Depot Square, which most people in Colorado Springs are quite familiar with as the original passenger rail station for Colorado Springs, one of two actually within the city. Now, Depot Square is currently restaurants and retail and office space. Part of our proposal would be to potentially repurpose a portion of those buildings in order to actually serve as the station and reintroduce passenger rail at this location. And we could see a lot of benefit to doing that. You can see that we have a pedestrian connection across the rail corridor that goes over to our platform itself on the west side. Now, with this west side platform, we would have some impacts to these yellow areas that are existing industrial buildings and also an office condominium building that is here on the south side of Colorado Avenue. We also have our bridge piers, which of course are right in the location where we would like to place our potential platform. Nonetheless, we do think that we could work around those bridge piers, but unfortunately some of these other building conflicts would be necessary if the platform remained in this particular location. The platform is located here. We've tried to move it further north so that we could avoid some of those impacts, but unfortunately we have some operational limitations. Further north from this area, the rail corridor actually crosses over Monument Creek, so it goes into a bridge. So the rail corridor really narrows down at that area. So the platform on the west side is really located as far south as we could possibly locate it in this particular location in relation to the Depot Square. Nonetheless, this is a positive site, and it is potentially beneficial to reintroduce passenger rail to the historic rail station. Our final site we refer to as the Depot Square West area. And this is a variation on the site at Depot Square that we just showed you on the east. However, the idea is to actually locate the facilities on the west side of the rail corridor as opposed to at the Depot Square itself. This does have the same impacts, or many of the same impacts, as we have with the Depot Square East, but however, additional buildings would be potentially impacted. We do have those same operational limitations, which is why our platform is in the location that it is. We also have some additional challenges of a single point of access up to Colorado from this particular area. Now, while other connections possibly could be made through private property over to Chimino, nonetheless, the west side of the rail corridor does have very few points of access and access across the rail corridor itself. So there are various challenges at this particular site. In the previous slides, we showed you the actual locations of each site and a potential layout and talked a little bit about some of the pros and cons for each. Now, this slide attempts to summarize some of our evaluation. You can see at the top here we have the 6 different sites, and then on the left side here we have some criteria and a simple red, yellow, and green scoring. Now, this criteria doesn't represent all of the criteria we examined, but it is some of the key criteria that help to influence the recommendations that we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, one key thing to point out here is that you see, some that have much green, some that maybe have more yellow and red here. But what I will say, of all of our 6 sites, they all have good potential. They are all strong sites. Our job has really been to try and tease out, what do we think that site that is the best or might be the top site with the most promise for success. So that's really what we've done here, but I do want to be clear that just because there's red and yellow on some of these, it does not mean that they're not viable sites. This is simply a comparison of each of these sites against one another. Keeping in mind that I noted we have no bad sites here, we've elected to actually rank order our sites. So we'll be going from 6 to 1 and telling you what we think our most promising site is at number 1 to go through each of them. Now, we are actually rank ordering them for a reason. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done beyond this project to continue to design and work with the community to determine the actual layout of the station itself and how it actually gets integrated into the community. There's also negotiations with private property owners, there's negotiations with the railroad, and simply a lot of technical details that need to be worked out. So given that any one of these sites is workable, should the timing and everything that we need fall into place properly, we've elected to rank order them. If one site were not to be able to work for us, we would then have a list of additional sites that we could go to in order based on the evaluation that we've completed as a project team. So I won't hold it any longer, and I'll show you the actual rank order. You can see our Nevada Tejon and our Depot West sites actually rank at the lower end of our scale. And at the top end of our scale is America the Beautiful Park and also the Depot East site being 1 and 2 respectively. They definitely, given their location and proximity to downtown, the development that's occurring around them, the level of infrastructure that exists around both of them, and accessibility, whether you're walking, biking, and also driving, thinking about how people would get to these sites from I-25 or other parts of the community. So there's a number of different reasons that these sites definitely rose to the top as 1 and 2 respectively. So rank ordering allows us some flexibility should additional challenges be raised beyond this study as more design and work is done to advance the station forward. Nonetheless, our top site is the America the Beautiful Park. It avoids most of the impacts that we see with other sites. It allows adjacent development on both the west and the east side of the rail corridor to really respond and develop around the station. It's integrated directly into the business improvement district and other ongoing infrastructure improvements that are happening in the Union Park neighborhood. It also allows for some potential connection or integration, at least, with the Drake redevelopment when that happens. This is close enough to Drake, but not so close that it has any impact on the existing power generation. It also minimizes impacts to freight and also finally provides an opportunity for the station facilities to be designed in such a way and maybe even incorporated into some of the surrounding development that could happen in the area. So there are a number of positive aspects that we see for America the Beautiful Park, and it's the reason that it is our top site. Now I'll close out the presentation with just a few next steps. We definitely are interested in your feedback and your positions on the America the Beautiful Park and how we've rank ordered all of our sites. To that end, we have created a questionnaire and it's linked off of our website as well as on the next slide we'll show you in a moment. Our project team will be looking for that feedback once it closes on the 19th of August and looking to see how that influences the remainder of the project. We also have additional discussions and work that we'll be doing with the railroads, with CDOT and the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And we'll be doing some additional refinements to the design and layout at America the Beautiful Park as well. So there's still work to be done on our project and work to be done beyond our project to realize a passenger rail station in Colorado Springs. With that said, I'd encourage you to go and take our questionnaire. It's open between the 8th and the 19th. It's also on our project website with additional information, or you can also contact our project manager from Mountain Metropolitan Transit if you have additional questions on the project. With that, thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to your feedback on our questionnaire.